Hi everyone. I'm Rui Teimao. I'm Simon Nagel. And we're from Accenture, which might sound a bit weird. A couple of guys from Accenture doing a gaming conference. Thought maybe we'll be able to clarify that. Who are we? Personal introductions first. So I've been with Accenture since the start of this year. Before that, I led conversation design at Lloyd's Banking Group, where I was across the design of the customer-facing chatbots for retail and for business banking, and also some internal chatbots. Before that, I ran my own agency called Unimaginatively Conversation Design. That we built Alexa skills mostly for the music business. I put Little Mix and Michael Bublé and Mariah Carey on Alexa, and it was a fun couple of years. Simon, do you want to do a quick intro and background first?
Yes, so I joined Accenture around the same time as you. Hopefully my voice can be booming. But, there you go. So my background is in screenwriting. I have written and developed content for National Geographic, CNBC, Eli Roth's Fit TV, and Toei Animation in Japan. I transitioned into conversation design with Samsung Bixby. I was on the personality team developing Bixby's character and also stressing emotional companionship for the user. So a lot of Bixby's dialogue. If you ask Bixby to tell you a Christmas story, it probably has my fingerprints on it. So that's me in a nutshell. There's so much more.
I think I've got this right here. Back to that question of who we are in kind of context. So we're both me and Simon work in the Song Conversation Design Hub. This presentation isn't long enough to go into kind of the structure of Accenture. It's 720,000 people worldwide. It's a load of engineers, designers, consultants, working across kind of pretty much every industry. The bit that we work in was called Fjord until the start of this year. Fjord was one of 30 agencies that Accenture kind of bought over the last 10 years. And just this year there's been a kind of smushing together of all of them, and we're now all called Song. And to get even more granular, we're in the Conversation Design Hub. So what Accenture was seeing was that there was a growing demand for conversation design. More and more organisations were leaning into chatbots, leaning into voice experiences to deliver customer service and to deliver their products. Conversation design is a relatively new practice. It's not brand new. I've been in it for about 8 years now, but it's still very new compared to practices like graphic design and UX design. And our hub operates across Europe. On the screen there, you can see like 720,000 people in Accenture, but our Conversation Design Hub, we're like a little startup. There's 6 of us. Felipe's in Stockholm, Grace is in Dublin, Daniel's in Denmark, Copenhagen, Berlin sometimes. Chris is in Edinburgh. Me and Simon are London-based. So we're a virtual team. Today's the first time I've met Simon in person, actually, weirdly enough.
Found out that I'm not just a disembodied
He's got legs. And kind of the work that we do within the hub is kind of a triple-pronged attack, which is one of the things that attracted me to it. First off, we carry out and commission research. So we work with kind of partners within Accenture that are very academic. Earlier this year we carried out a big piece of research into kind of unintended consequences of conversational interfaces. What sort of stuff happens that you might not expect? There are many. There's some bad stuff that can happen if you don't think about what you're doing. Our research and our experience across the team feeds into methodology. So we create and manage a massive PowerPoint of a couple of hundred pages of steps through step-by-step process of how to do conversation design. And this is specifically around the design. So we don't get involved in build. We're agnostic. You can be on Watson, you can be on Dialogflow, you can be on Alexa. Our methodology is independent of platform. and is all about design principles, design research, design activities, and the process that we go through to create effective human-centric interfaces. And all of that leads into, we are still Accenture, that does lead into practice. We do work for clients. Both Simon and I worked on a skill for a client we won't name, but it was around doing a test drive without a car salesman in the seat next to you, and having a Lexus instead, answering questions about the car. We also are working with a whole bunch of banks across Europe, banks, insurance companies. And I think that's kind of why we're here, is we're not in the gaming industry. Accenture is really interested in the metaverse, and we are now, our research this year is all kind of metaverse centric for the next sort of 12 months or so. There's a lot of experimentation and research into immersive environments broadly. We've got a bit of a view that at the moment they just don't look good enough. They need to get better. It sounds like that could be on its way. And that has brought us kind of a lot closer into the world of gaming. There's a lot of overlap, right? As soon as you're thinking about immersive experiences, as soon as you're thinking about what do you need in a space to make it convincing, to make it natural and easy to operate in, and make it simple for people who are in there to fulfill their objectives, then we start to see massive overlap with what's happening in the gaming industry. But let's come back to a process slide, because we love those. We've got a really rigorous and robust process that is pretty standard, 4 stages. The first stage is around discovery, so that's like understanding who your users are, what they want and what they need. They're often different things. What the ecosystem is, like what the organisation needs, what the client needs. Then we go on to envision, where we think about, in the context of what the users need and what the people need and what the organisational objectives are, what are some potential routes to resolving that? What are potential routes to solving those problems? A lot of this stuff is kind of workshop based. It's about getting people together in the room and kind of co-creating. Once we've been through envision stages, only then do we start to think about design. Only then do we start to think, right, what are the actual dialogues that we're writing? What are the intents that we're going to have? And which ones do we need? Where are we going to have scripted responses? Where might we be using AIs to create generated responses? Incidentally, that's such a hot topic. It's like month to month, the capabilities there are advancing. The stuff that's possible now with just light prompting of a system versus kind of scripting out the entire dialogue is absolutely game-changing for our business, and also game-changing for our process. And only then, once we've kind of mapped out what all the interactions should be, what the intent should be, how that all works, then at that point we hand over to engineers, who then get on with the build, and we hang around to kind of support them and answer questions as we go through. But the reason we're here today is about one very specific bit of our design process, which is around personality. Personality is absolutely central to any conversational interface. There's a term, I'll probably mash it up. It's pareidolia, P-A-R-E-I-D-O-L-I-A, and that's the human brain's tendency to recognise patterns. It's why we see the shape of Jesus in like stains on shrouds, and sometimes you get the Virgin Mary on a bit of toast. There are Twitter accounts that are full of like binoculars that look like they're smiling, and in car design, particularly in Japan, like the face of the car is a really important part of the design, right? The headlights are the eyes and the grille is the mouth, and like they don't like sad faces. And pareidolia in this context is around the fact that humans will project a personality onto anything that they're talking to. If you're talking to something, you will create a personality in your mind about what that thing is, based on the things that it says and the way that it says them and the way that it uses the words that it uses and the intonations that it uses, and so the fact is that personality exists in any conversational AI system, in anything that you talk to speaks back to you, asks you a question, you answer the question. The user in that context is going to create a personality in their mind. So it's really, really important that as the designer of the experience, that you try to exert some control over that, that you try to ensure that you're creating the right personality in your user's mind so that they know how to interact with it. Conversation interfaces are all about the fact that conversation is a really natural form of communication. We learn it, start learning it in the womb, and we learn most of it when we're pre-verbal in the first kind of 18 months, 2 years of our lives. That's when we learn most of the stuff that we know about conversation. That's why there are loads of rules. You ask people what those rules are, nobody can explicitly say what they are. But when you dig in and you start pulling out, actually, this is how a conversation is structured. When anyone sees that stuff, it's like, oh yeah, of course, that's how it works. So we know it, but we don't know that we know it. And so on that note, I'm going to hand over to Simon to talk through kind of some more reasons why personality design is super important.
All right, so one of the we don't have a note for that one. Very good. So we design a personality because one of the reasons, one of the things that comes up in our research is we need a feeling of reciprocity when we speak to each other. It needs, in other words, how can it feel real? Because so much so people don't trust conversational AI a lot of times. So we need to form emotional connections. We see neuroscience teaches us when we are emotionally engaged, we retain more information at a faster rate. And that also, if we form an emotional connection, then we also see more successful conversations, more successful interactions. If it's a game, greater immersion, greater connection, and we form connections with characters we identify with. So that's for feeling real. That also creates greater dimension to a game or to any sort of just any sort of interaction. But so it adds to a full environment. Whereas if you're just getting something, like if it's just I want to purchase something, or if it's more if there's more of a dimension to it, then we feel more emotionally satisfied. And then finally, forming a connection. When to do that, we have to ask questions like, what are fully dimensional character traits when it comes to a conversation? And what does that mean? What makes a character feel real? And what goes deeper than a few traits? Because we can say, oh, something's nice, but nice doesn't tell you anything. It's kind of a cardboard word. What has roots? Right. So even if you peel things back and just ask simple questions like, what is this character's likes and dislikes, and how does a character feel about something, and how will they behave when those feelings are tested? That creates dimensionality. And that's more than just, oh, I'm just getting A to B. It creates something with a little bit more breathing. So how do we do this? I go, yes, here we go. All right, so when we, to do this, like for example, at Accenture, we will take, we'll get our client or stakeholders together and we'll have just a big whiteboard and we'll do a series of exercises and discussions and our investigation to form a personality for what they're looking for. And if we complete these and some others, it'll help us get enough information for a three-dimensional character. And that can also inform how this character will speak. So, so something I want to start with is just it's a simple quote, something we've all probably heard. Character is destiny, is an old quote from the Greek philosopher Heraclitus. And the words are the engine of storytelling, right? So this goes from Oedipus to Hamlet to pop culture icons like Batman or Wall-E. Their journeys are determined not by outside forces, but the makings of their inner character. So in the sense of a bot, that would be our interaction goals. That's their destiny. That shapes who they are, how they interact. So for example, if you had let's say a health app, right? Their destiny is to help us be healthy or get healthier or to heal. That's our mission. So when we define our mission, that can help that can help with the others. So for example, power dynamics. Let's go with the health app. Who has the power there? Is it equal? Is it a coach? In which case the bot actually probably has a little bit more power than us, telling us what to do. We're looking to them for guidance. Or is it more reciprocal? And that's when it gets to that feeling of reciprocity. Can the bot give a little to us so we trust it emotionally, a form of connection? Or does it serve us? Is it like a service bot? Are we just buying something that's helping us out, or an FAQ, right? It answers to us. And then that's when it gets into traits. Now think of these after we answer these two like archetypal terms, right? What kind of traits for like a guide or like a Sherpa? What about a coach, a friend? And how can they tie the interaction goals into the mission? And then that's how it can inform the behaviors. Oh, notes. Yes. And a way to think about this is, like I said, how now we have like a little bit of sense, like an archetypal, or we know some of the intricacies of the interaction goals and the power dynamics. Well, okay, we say this, knowing what we know, how would it respond? Right? What would that sound like? And this is when you can dive into attitude. And their attitude can actually be like, well, let's say for a coach then, and just for, let's say like a service bot, how do they feel if somebody wants to make a return? Does that, like, can you insert something where they feel like they didn't do their job well, or that's when it starts, like we start thinking of these like kind of outer terms where it's like these little bits of flavor that make it feel more interesting. Like, how another way to think about it for gaming is how can we make that classic NPC? Right? How can we make that classic NPC? Like my favorite is the merchant from Resident Evil, where he just shows up out of nowhere, but it's like this really interesting weirdo. What are you buying? Anyway, I'm so sorry I did an English accent here. Language. And now that we've assembled all these components of character, what does that sound like? And how would this character say in response to X? And think of it, how can we test the premise of this thing that we've designed? Right, and so from there, now that I have talked us all into oblivion, I will turn it back over to Rui.
Thanks, Simon. So yeah, I'm just going to kind of summarize step through kind of each of the steps. Interaction goals is what's the mission of this character. If we think about within game design, it's like you're thinking about individual characters within the game. I'm thinking of the box bot. So you think what's the character's mission, or what's the NPC's mission, or what's the avatar's mission? What's its purpose in life? Power dynamics, we often translate, because it sounds a bit of a highfalutin term. Just think about jobs. Is it a butler? Is it a shop assistant? Is it a librarian? Is it a coach? Is it your boss? Is it an employee? Out of that come traits. Your boss will behave very differently with you, will have different traits than an employee will versus a teacher versus a guide versus a shopkeeper. A boss might be demanding, might be impatient, depends what your boss is like. revealing a bit of my professional history there. Whereas an employee might be keen or lazy. Out of those traits, then what does that mean in terms of how they behave? Like an impatient, demanding boss is going to like just turn up out of the blue and ask you to do stuff, which is unlikely thing for an employee to do. An employee is more likely to like just keep their head down until you ask them to do something, possibly. Once those behaviors are mapped out, then you start to think about how will they speak in a particular context. And Simon's example was a great one of you know, how's a shop assistant going to feel when you take something back? And actually, that can really vary from shop to shop, right? In some shops, it's like you've broken their heart. In other shops, they don't care. Go over there. Show us your receipt.
All year to make this.
And language is where we start to. It's still sort of quite a high level, but that's where you start to think about what's the character going to say. And once you've mapped out a bunch of context and how's it going to react in this situation, how's it going to react in that situation, what we end up with normally is either a virtual or a real whiteboard that has all of these things mapped out on a canvas. They lead from one into the other. We generally work collaboratively. We get groups of people. You can do this yourself. You can just sit there as a designer and think, oh, what's his character's mission and what's his power dynamics. But we find there's always real value in, like, ironically, perhaps, in having conversation about these things, about having multiple people involved and getting a bit of to and fro on what these things mean. Once you've mapped out all of this stuff, the actual design of the interactions, what are the intents that we need, what's the dialogue that we're going to write for these particular interactions, just sort of falls out. It comes out of this process, and you've got really clear kind of signposts about what you should do and some really clear, like, no entry signs about things that you wouldn't do. If you've decided that your power dynamic for your health coach is that they're going to be a coach, and they're going to be asking you to do things and pushing you to go harder, that gives you really clear indications about what kind of behaviors they're going to have and what kind of language they're going to use. And then when you come to actually do the design work of how's the coach going to react when I haven't hit my step count for the day, it's really obvious. He's going to be really pissed off. He's going to tell me to go out and do another 2,000 steps so I hit my target. There are some other factors that are specific to voice that don't apply when we're designing chatbots. The first one is around inclusion and accessibility. We're really hot on that, and actually it is a bit complicated. It is hard not to exclude certain people based on like traditional accessibility things. But there are some other things, like dialect training models to understand a Scottish accent versus a London accent versus a Bristol accent. Sonics come into play. We talk about tone of voice all the time, even if it's just a chatbot. It's a writing thing, right? It's what words are within the tone of this character and what words are not. But actually, when you're talking about voice, you're then coming into actually what does the voice sound like? And if you get one of Amazon Polly's like very neutral voices and stick that behind an orc in the role-playing game, it's not going to work very well, right? And then the other thing is that as I'm pathetically demonstrating, is that actual human communication isn't just words and voice. We gesture and we have facial expressions. We're still kind of in the uncanny valley on facial expressions, but that stuff's getting better all the time. And the rate of acceleration of this stuff, don't think it's going to be too long before we're thinking about not just what characters are saying, but what's the expression on their face while they're saying it and what their hands doing while they're saying it as well. So to summarize, there's huge potential for voice. I think we've already seen brilliant examples today of how it can add, it can be a brilliant and interesting dynamic for the core of gameplay. But actually, if we think about broadly the things that we're doing in games, having an additional voice layer, I've been using quite a bit of Oculus recently and kind of moving around. And I actually stuck my Oculus on my mum's head. She's like 75. She's quite tech literate. She could not get on she couldn't move about. She goes, oh, she got it straight away. She's like, oh, this is amazing. It's like you're in a different place. but she couldn't move around at all. And just being able to say, like, move forwards, turn left, go right, go and look at that thing over there, would just massively increase the accessibility and use of VR environments within gaming environments. There have been things. I remember Forza on the Xbox One had some basic voice interactions. You weren't using your voice to drive the car, but if there was a report of a car, there's a barn somewhere that's got some classic car in it, you could tell it to, right, yeah, set a map locator for that barn and I'll go there. So kind of having an additional layer, huge potential. The other point that I wanted to make is that voice and conversation design are new-ish in gaming. There's been toes dipped, but it feels like the technology is at a point now where it's mature enough to have really robust experience in games. But it's not a brand new practice. So there's loads of materials out there. There's loads of resources. There are books. There are great websites where you can kind of learn how to do this stuff. And I absolutely recommend doing that. If you don't do anything else, there's a book called Conversations with Things, which is absolutely brilliant, absolutely nails the conversation design process. It's co-authored, it's Rebecca Evan-Ho, and I don't remember the other co-author's name, but absolutely brilliant book. But yeah, just start like reading about it. And when you're thinking about voice, you need to do personality development. It will add a layer of immersion to the games are an immersive experience, right? We're creating an alternative reality that we want our players to subsume themselves in. And games are brilliant at fooling our eyes. They're brilliant at fooling our ears, but at the moment, the language centers of our brain just aren't engaging and aren't being fooled. So it's just smashing that fourth wall straight away.
It's a hidden tool for creating atmosphere and just an ecosystem for your characters to live in.
And the very last point is to not underestimate the potential, but also the complexity. Voice is like it's quite hard. It's quite hard to do, right? Things that might seem like, oh, that's simple. A common thing we see with clients is, oh, no, there's no screen, so it's going to be really simple to do. Like, it's fiddly stuff. So the best advice I can give is to start soon. Don't just wait. Think about small little micro use cases where a little bit of voice might add a little bit of a something, and get cracking on that, because you're going to be doing a lot of learning along the way. And it's all great learning, and we're all learning together. But that's pretty much it. We've been Simon and Rui from Accenture. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you, gentlemen. Have you got a moment for Q&A?
Oh, yes, sorry. I forgot.
Any questions? Yes.
Hi. Sorry. Okay, so you mentioned a couple of times how you really need a personality to really bring the characterization forward. So how do you go about creating a personality that everyone can relate to? Because obviously, like, I would react differently to certain things than maybe you would. So for example, with the health thing that you mentioned, one person might be like more open to something that's a bit friendlier, and someone else might need something that's a lot sterner. So how do you go about identifying what would work best?
Great question. So there's a few things there. So frankly, when you, like, for example, if you're talking about a bank, right? I'll go to my pre-Accenture experience, Lloyds Bank, right? Lloyds have 10 million customers in the UK. Every possible kind of personality profile is involved there. What you end up with there is something that's pretty bland, pretty neutral. And you don't have a huge amount of you don't have a huge amount of explicit personality. It's about neutralizing. You do things around language that more around accessibility, right? You aim for a super low reading age. You aim for a reading. There's a Flush Kincaid scores where you can kind of assess your copy based on how long your sentences are and how long the words are in the sentence, and you get a score out of that. So there are tools that you can use to make sure that your stuff is as readable and understandable to as many people as possible. But the other kind of the main thing really is around research, is around talking to people. So you survey people, you survey customers, and you interview people, and you do focus groups. Now, obviously, at a small indie level, that stuff can be quite tricky to do, and honestly, at a big corporate level, it's often quite difficult to kind of pull it together. But there's nothing better than talking to as many users as possible, testing with as many users as possible. It's all about iterative feedback loops. So like your first stab at a design is very much that. It's your first stab at something. It's like your best guess at what the right thing is. And as soon as you unleash it on people, they will show you all the places where your guesses were wrong and you underestimated things or you overestimated things. But the main one really, and then it's contextual. So a health app, it depends if you want to take a point of view. So you might want to take a point of view of like, this is going to be like a personal trainer. It's going to be like a pushy coach. And if you're not going to respond well to that, then you're probably not the target user.
An inverse is you can also, this is something that we've done over this talked a lot about this year, is examine every possible way something can go wrong. So you can do,
because it will.
If it will, it's a doom workshop, right? You can go through the unintended consequences of something that you think might be great, but that thing that you think is funny might not be funny, or you know, almost sometimes, and the unexpected one like with banking is too much empathy, right? But
yeah, so there's like you need empathy for this stuff, right? Because you need to put yourself in the heart of the eyes of the user, in the heart of the user. And the way we do that as designers is not to base it on what's my personal instinctive reaction to this, but it's always to go back to either like academic research and behavioral science stuff, or it's not an either or, it's and finding the target users, talking to them, and it really comes out of that of just, and you know, you can never talk to 1,000 people and get 1,000 people, but just talking to 20 people, as long as they're different. And another really important thing that we look at really carefully is around diversity of the people involved in making the thing, right? So that you have a mix of genders. We're a bit male heavy at the moment, which is about to recruit 2 female designers into our hub because we've been super aware of that. But you make sure you have gender diversity, age diversity. You have people with different kind of neurodiversities as well, and just making sure that you've got as much diversity in the team, and then you're casting your net as wide as you can around your even before you get to testing, around your potential users. And then the same again, it's all about have a stab, put it in front of people, get in the feedback, iterate around that, do that again. And in fact, like for a banking chatbot, that's a never-ending process. That's a continuous, ongoing process that you're always reviewing. And then the other thing, once you're live, the other thing you've got is the actual interactions. You've got the logs of the conversations, you've got the transcripts of the conversations. If you can capture that stuff and then at a small scale, manually just read it all. You read it all, like reading banking chatbot transcripts tell you very, very quickly where you're getting stuff right and where you're getting stuff wrong. But at a larger scale, where you're having 10,000 conversations a day, 20,000 conversations a day, it's physically impossible. A person can probably grade about 400 to 500 conversations a day once they're really good and fast at it. There are now tools, machine learning based tools, where you take these massive piles of 50,000 transcripts and you shove them all in and it pipes out. These are the things that people are a bit pissed off about, and these are the things that are going really well.
One more thing I'll add is, so from another end, like for example, with something like a Bixby, which is a companion, when in doubt, fall back on some of the larger aspects of the character that you've designed. However, it's like a do no harm approach. Instead of like really trying to force something quirky or unique, remember that this, like for example, Bixby, this voice assistant is to be somebody's companion or friend. So like so instead of trying to force something, just what's just an easy thing a friend would say. So it's, when you stay true to your design, you don't have to reach a lot.
I just remembered I didn't finish the empathy story.
Yeah, I'm just setting you up for that.
Yeah.
Nicely.
The dangers of over-empathizing, or trying to over-empathize, or empathizing badly. So one of the things that banks, all banks are quite hot on, is around bereavement journeys. Right, someone close has died, and you need to contact the bank to let them know that the person's died. No one wants to put a chatbot in front of that. That needs to have a human on the other side, because anything that needs deep reactive empathy, you can't do with a chatbot. Chatbots can't do that. But if everyone's coming into a chatbot, you need to kind of recognize that, and you need to kind of, okay, this person's talking about a bereavement, so let's put them straight in front of a human. Let's not try and do any more chatbotting. So we did that at Lloyd's, and we had a bunch of training around an intent that was around bereavement. So if someone says, my mother's died, my father's died, my husband's died, my wife's died, someone's died, I need to close their account. That we would recognize that, it would say, oh, I'm really sorry for your loss. We've got a special team here to help you. Here's how you get in touch with them. What we didn't expect was people telling us that their battery has died on their phone.
It is feeling sorry for a small technological presence.
So I can't cancel my card on the app because my battery's died. Oh, I'm really sorry for your loss. We've got a special team here ready to help. So one of the things you have to be really careful about in moments of extreme empathy, where it really matters, is to make sure that you're not getting it wrong. Because if you get it wrong, that's like that example is a bit embarrassing. But you could think of examples the other way. You could think of examples the other way around, where it would be a lot worse than embarrassing, and you could actually be getting stuff super. You could be upsetting people. You could be doing real harm. So empathy is really, really important, but it's really important to get it right and not go over the top with it, not assume an emotional state necessarily. Like, people react differently in different circumstances.
Don't force them to feel something.
Yeah, I hated the bastard.
So any other questions? Okay, fine. Well, we'll be around after.
Thank you, Rui, Simon. Much appreciated.
Thank you.